going on, football fans? Welcome to another episode of Bad Takes in Football. This is your host, Bad Takes. Excited to dive into the Week 11 upcoming games. We'll go ahead and dive into those shortly. Make sure you take your seats. Also, make sure you subscribe, like, comment. Tell me what you think about these upcoming games. We'll be diving into those shortly. What is this even going live to? Did I make this private? All right, let's wait a little bit longer for people to pile in. Like I said, make sure you like, make sure you comment. Tell me what you think of these week's upcoming games. Excited to dive into those. I prompted the chat with a question. Curious to see who you guys have as the MVP of the league right now. For me, I think it's clear and obvious answer has to be Jonathan Taylor, but we'll dive more into that today as well. But like I said, let's go ahead and get started. We'll dive in first off to the Thursday night football game. So we're talking about the New York Jets traveling to New England to play the New England Patriots Thursday night football. Patriots are on an absolute heater right now. That's first and foremost. The New England Patriots have won 7 games in a row at this point. The biggest concern I would have about this game would be whether or not the New England Patriots just simply overlook the Jets because of how bad they actually are. That, to me, that's really the only true way that this New York Jets team has any sort of shot, because right now the biggest weakness that the New England Patriots actually had, I would say the beginning of the season especially, and at this point I'm not nearly as concerned about this as I was before, but TreVeyon Henderson and their run game, they did not have that figured out for the longest time. It seems to me that TreVeyon has turned a page. The last couple weeks especially has played at a much higher level. When you want to look at his stats throughout the actual season, it's interesting because he's nowhere near the top of the list when it comes to leaders around the NFL. He's currently 26th in the NFL right now. But again, a lot of that came from this last couple weeks, especially. In November, he has 202 yards. So half of his yards for this season comes just in November. That, again, he's averaging 7.2 yards per carry in November and 2 touchdowns. So TreVeyon Henderson figuring it out for this Patriots team is a huge reason I feel like they are where they are. I really do think that. Now, from a Jets perspective, when it comes to them, first off, I was looking at Justin Fields' stats, and he'll have 3 games in a row where he is throwing for 50, 60 yards in a game, and that's not even a joke. Like, he's legitimately throwing 50, 60 yards in an entire game as a starting quarterback in the NFL. He also has some games where he's throwing for over 250 yards, 300 yards, but those are few and far between. It's really been, the first game of the season, and, it was last week he had a solid game. Not this most recent week. I'd say 2 weeks prior. I apologize. Where essentially Tyrod Taylor was going to take his starting role. You could tell that Justin Fields was actually playing for something, and he had a solid game in that game against I believe it was against the Browns, but still they're just not putting the wins together. I just have a feeling, especially with the secondary that the Patriots have, that this is going to have to be a game where Breece Hall will have to put the team on his back if the Jets want to have any sort of shot at this. I personally think that the Patriots are going to win pretty big in this one. I think the Patriots win 28-10 in this game. It's going to be a sleeper of a Thursday night football game. And the Patriots are going to win 8 games in a row, which is just crazy to think about, but that's really where I see this game going. Next game we'll talk about the Commanders versus the Miami Dolphins. This is going to be an interesting one. So, somehow in this game, and I'm not even sure how this actually happens, especially with how I felt about the Commanders going into the season, but I actually have more confidence in the Miami Dolphins than I do the Washington Commanders right now. And the obvious answer for that is the fact that Jaden Daniels is out. The quarterback for the Commanders, he's out for a considerable time. I'm not sure if we'll see him at all at the end of this season, especially with how the Commanders have looked recently. The Commanders right now, they are 3-7. So are the Miami Dolphins, but the Miami Dolphins, they've shown a lot more fight the last couple of weeks. Even in the loss against the Ravens, they've kind of bookshelfed that one by 2 wins, and Tua's performing at a much higher level of the last 3 games. I will say, Devon Achane also playing at a whole nother level. Achane is really the reason why this Dolphins team was able to beat the Buffalo Bills last weekend. And against this Commanders defense, I still think he has another good shot at doing that again. I know that Allen, the defensive tackle for the Commanders, I believe he's actually suspended for this game. So that's going to be a huge miss for this Commanders team. And I think it's going to really help out the Dolphins on the offensive side, especially Devon Achane. He's not necessarily running it up the middle on a regular basis. That's not his style of runs. He's an outside sort of runner and also a great receiving running back. But again, just having someone like him out, I think is going to have a huge impact on this game. And, again, I think Tua I think he's fighting for his job. I think he's fighting for his career. Same thing with Mike McDaniel. I think both of them at this point it's a 1 week, every single week tryout to determine whether or not they are going to be in the future plans for this Miami Dolphins team. I struggle to think that they feel super confident about either one of these still at this point. I will say the last couple weeks they've really turned it around, and the biggest thing is this: they haven't showed any quit. Right? They've continued to fight, and being a 3-7 team, being in a division with the Patriots, with the Bills, and just knowing you don't really have a single shot at getting to the playoffs. That has to be demoralizing in itself. So the fact that they're continuing to fight says a lot about this team, and definitely happy for them. Again, I'll stop real quick. While you're in here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure you comment and chat. Tell me, who do you think is the MVP of the league at this point through the season? We're already to week 11, which is just crazy to think about. We only have 6 more weeks of regular season football after this week. So everyone get prepared for that. We're getting down the home stretch of NFL football right now. It's fun, but it's also scary at the same time because that means it's almost over. So we got to enjoy it while it lasts. Next game I'm going to get into, Panthers versus the Falcons. So the Falcons gave up 146 rushing yards a game. And right now, the entire Panthers team is Rico Dowdle, along with their defense. I will say that. The Panthers defense is solid. And Rico Dowdle, I believe at this point, he is like 3rd in the league. I could be wrong. Let me just go ahead and look back at this real fast. I do believe that Rico Dowdle, he's 3rd in the league. He has 788 yards rushing. And that's for someone that wasn't even the main guy really up until a couple weeks ago. You know, Rico Dowdle, he won that position. He took it away from Chuba Hubbard. Sorry, he took it away from Chuba Hubbard, who had an injury, and when Rico Dowdle stepped in, he did not want to lose that job. And it was interesting because the Panthers actually decided, like, they tried to kind of give Chuba Hubbard back his carries, and that did not work out. They've realized Rico Dowdle is the answer. This is one of those games where I've talked about this a lot. I don't have a lot of confidence in Michael Penix purely because he's just extremely inconsistent. And for me, I actually have more confidence in Penix as a quarterback than I do in Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young, he's in a situation right now with the Carolina Panthers, in my opinion, where he's there just purely because they gave up so much to get him. And at this point in time, there isn't really another option that they can go for unless they like really take another risk. And so for me, that's a huge reason why you're going to see Bryce Young out there throughout this year. You'll probably even see him again next year, because if you look at the free agents, the top free agent from a quarterback perspective is Daniel Jones going into next year. Now, if the Colts actually let Daniel Jones walk, that would be unbelievable, because they've been trying to find a quarterback ever since they lost Andrew Luck. They've really been struggling to find someone. They've had sort of makeshift starting quarterbacks. They've also had like Phillip Rivers, but for the most part, they haven't had a guy. And so when you have Daniel Jones, who's the number one passer in the NFL right now, there's no doubt in my mind he is going to most likely stay in Indianapolis. The one caveat to this, and the one thing that I think makes it somewhat interesting, is the fact that Daniel Jones is actually from Charlotte, where the Carolina Panthers play. So he is the one guy I could see the Panthers going after next year, but again, I don't imagine they're even going to have the chance to do that. And again, that's why we're going to continue to see Bryce Young out there. But to me, it's clear and obvious he is not the answer. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Michael Penix. I don't think that he's necessarily the guy or going to be a long-standing franchise quarterback in the NFL, but I still have a little bit more confidence in him. I also really like Drake London in this game. I think Drake London has really turned the page, and he's looking like one of the top receivers in the NFL right now, in my opinion. I know he's not necessarily there from a yardage perspective, but overall impact, Drake London is having quite the game. He's seventh in receiving, and he has 6 touchdowns as well on top of that, which is, up there at the top of the list, right behind someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has 8, just to give you a little bit of frame of reference. So I do think, just purely because this is a divisional game, I think it'll be a little bit closer. I actually see the Panthers losing this game to the Falcons. I see the Falcons winning it 21-17 at home, and they're able to start turning it around a little bit, because they are on sort of like a losing streak right now, the Falcons are. So I think they're actually going to start to turn this thing around. Next game we're going to go into, this is going to be a fun one. I think this might actually be one of the more exciting games of the week. I'm not necessarily going to name it the top game, but the Buccaneers are going into Buffalo to play the Bills. Both of these teams are 6-3. Both of them have started to kind of slide a little bit. The Bills, they have the last 3 weeks, both these teams are 1-2. They've had 1 win and 2 losses in the last 3 weeks. And so that's what I mean by a little bit of a slide. To me, the concerning part is the fact that, the Bills are 2-2 in the last 4 games is really what it is. They won against the Panthers and against the Chiefs, but they lost against the Dolphins and the Falcons, and then also the Patriots even before that. So really, if you want to look at they're 2-3 in the last 5 games. So again, there is a little bit of a slide there for the Bills. They are a couple games now behind the New England Patriots, which is just crazy to think about, but is obviously the case in this situation, because the Patriots, they're 8-2. Again, for me, when it comes to this game, which team really turns it on is the biggest question. The biggest factor, and I will say I think the Bills have the edge in this game purely for one reason. The Bills' weakness is on their rushing defense, right? Their rushing defense, there's being able to stop the run is where they really struggle. That is really the Bucks' weakness, though. The Buccaneers do not really have a running game right now. It's essentially the Baker Mayfield show. It's Baker or bust in Tampa Bay at this point, and so that really plays into Buffalo's hands because Buffalo, they have one of the better pass defenses out there. And so again, to me, I just think that the Bills just have like a better matchup against us. Like I really like this Bucks team. I wish I could even say like, hey, I think the Bucks will win this game. But honestly, without like a Mike Evans and without even like any sort of semblance of a rushing game for this Buccaneers team, I have to say the Bills are going to turn this around. You know, the Bills, they struggled mightily against the Dolphins. They can't like afford to lose games anymore. On the Buccaneer side, they do have a lot more, I would say, cushion. They're a lot more comfortable in the place that they're at because their closest contender is the Carolina Panthers. And so I really do think that the Bills will win this game, and I think that they win this game by like a touchdown. I think the Bills win this game 27-20. Again, while you're in here, make sure you like, make sure you comment. Tell me about what you think about who's going to be the MVP of this season so far. That's a question I have in chat. Make sure you put that in chat. All right, let's go ahead and let's get into this next game. We won't talk too much about this one. I'm talking about the Texans versus the Titans. So I actually released a video earlier today about the fact that the Texans have the number one team or the number one defense in the NFL currently, but oddly enough, they actually have a losing record. To me, that's a very uncommon. That's like a very it's almost like an anomaly. Honestly, is how I'm kind of looking at it. Is you kind of look at this and say, how is a team 4-5 when they have the best defense in the NFL and they have a middle of the pack offense, right? Like to me that just says and screams, hey, like this is a winning team right here. But they haven't been there yet. And I think I talked about this. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that their offense didn't really turn it on until really week 5. I think week 5 when they played the Ravens was like the first time you really saw this defense or offense be explosive. Now, at this point, C.J. Stroud, I do not expect to see C.J. Stroud out there. I would be a little bit shocked. But whether or not it's C.J. Stroud or Davis Mills, I still give the nod to the Texans, especially from a quarterback perspective. I am selling all of my Cam Ward stock. At this point in time, I know they didn't have to give up a lot to get him. They fell into that number one spot. But to me, they drafted Cam Ward because he was the best quarterback in the draft class. At least they thought he was. But at the same time, he's done nothing to actually prove that, in my opinion. At this point in time, he does not look like he should have even been potentially a first-round pick. I mean, maybe, sure, like maybe that's a little bit harsh. I won't go that far, but I truly do not, I am not a believer in Cam Ward. I just think, and also this Titans team overall is just, they're bad on all levels, right? They don't have a good defense. Their offense struggles, and their special teams is essentially a non-factor because of those two factors. So I think the Texans win this game. I do think Cam Ward's going to put up a couple points, but I think the Texans will win this game 23-17. Next game we have coming up, we're going to talk about a division rival between the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings, they're struggling right now, and the Bears are hot. That's like the first and foremost thing that I want to say. Get out there is this Minnesota Vikings team. They lost to the Ravens, and there were a lot of turnovers in that game. I think that's the biggest reason why they lost that game. I mean, it was only essentially I think like a 7-point game at a certain point in the game, but they were just struggling. It was interceptions, it was fumbles, And again, that was the reason why that Ravens team won. And so if the Vikings team can actually minimize turnovers, especially against a Bears team, I really do think they have a legitimate shot at this game. I do think that Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson have figured it out. I think that the way that they have worked together, especially the last 5-6 weeks, has shown me that that system is going to work with Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams knows how to use it, and that's the most important factor, obviously, in this situation. And so again, I think in this game especially, if Justin Jefferson doesn't have one of his Justin Jefferson type games, and Aaron Jones isn't moving the ball from a rushing perspective, this game could potentially get out of hand. I do not actually expect that to happen. And in my opinion, I think this is a game, again, where the Bears end up battling back. I think the Vikings will come out hot. I think J.J. McCarthy and Justin Jefferson will connect pretty early on and often. But I do think the Bears end up fighting back in this game, and I think they're going to win this game 24-23. I think this is going to be a very close divisional game, and you're going to end up seeing the Bears with yet another win on their record, and the Packers are going to continue to have to fight in order to keep up with them as well as the Lions. So that's really where I see that game going. Let's talk a little bit about the Packers and the Giants. Two very different teams. First off, haven't looked necessarily or haven't seen the news as to what weapons the Packers can or should expect back. They were without Romeo Doubs for most of the second half. They were also without Matthew Golden, and they've been missing Jaden Reed for quite some time with a broken collarbone. He broke his collarbone I think it was like week 2 or 3 against the Commanders. But they're missing their weapons bad. This Packers offense looks abysmal, to say the least. It's not even fun to watch. Like that Monday Night Football game, you watch that game for the defense. That is the only reason why you watched the Packers versus the Eagles, was you were just waiting to see a defensive game. The offense on both sides of the game was terrible, like Eagles as well, but the Packers especially. Jordan Love looked very uncomfortable. He looked like he was constantly under pressure. He was under pressure a fair amount as well, but you almost felt like you watched him, you felt like he was expecting it, right? That's really how I felt when I watched him, was he was expecting to get hit, and so he was making dumb mistakes. I felt like he was inaccurate because of that. He wasn't fully stepping into his throws, and that showed. And so again, I think this is a game that is honestly just purely because Dart will most likely be out. I do not think that Dart should play. Even if he does clear concussion protocols, like there's no point in risking an injury with Jackson Dart. Like that guy's going to be a stud for this team. Like don't give him another head injury. I'm curious to see how their interim head coach kind of attacks this game. I heard Jameis Winston is going to be the starter. That's the news around town, which I actually love. I think that's exciting. Jameis Winston, he actually gives this team probably the best shot of any of those quarterbacks, because he's such like a boomer bust guy. Like he actually might make it hard for Jordan Love to keep up with this Giants offense if he's on. If Jameis Winston is clicking on all cylinders, he's not throwing 5 interceptions in a game, this could actually be a pretty close game. Do I actually expect that? Unfortunately not. As much as I love Jameis Winston and the culture he's built and how that team really rallies around him, I do expect the Packers to bounce back, because again, they're fighting for their lives right now. The Giants season's already over. I think that the Packers win this game. I think they win it 23-13. I do expect some of his weapons back for Love, and I think that's going to help out in a really big way. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bengals versus the Steelers. So before I even get into this game, did you guys see the fact that Joe Burrow is back at practice? That was, honestly, I'll be honest, it was a little bit scary for me at first. As a Ravens fan, I did not want to see Joe Burrow already back at practice, because to me, what that says is he'll be there for the game where the Ravens play the Bengals. I think it's like the day after Thanksgiving, or it's on Thanksgiving. I can't exactly remember, but they are playing Thanksgiving weekend. And so that is one of those games where you kind of wonder, like, is he going to be back for that game? And to me, it kind of looks like he will be. Um, Now, on the other side of that, Joe Flacco is playing at such a high level. Like, he threw for like 470 yards, and this team still loses. And so I bring that up to say, like, does anyone actually think Joe Burrow would actually do better than what Joe Flacco is doing with this offense? Like, does anyone actually look at this and say, you know what, Joe Burrow would have won that game because of X, Y, and Z? Because to me, I feel like Joe Flacco is doing everything he possibly can, and this defense does whatever it can to fuck it up. This defense is just like, hey, you know what, like, how many points you want? 50? Make it 55. We got you. Like, it's almost sad to watch how bad this Bengals defense is. Now, the Steelers, they're a little bit with their backs against the wall right now. The media is talking about, everyone's kind of, they're already alluding, and everyone's expecting at this point the Ravens to take over the AFC North. Whether that's actually the case, I don't know. I think there's a good chance of that happening. With the way the Steelers played against that Chargers team, I actually thought that they matched up well against the Chargers, and how they performed scared me. Their offensive line looked back to being the shaky offensive line they looked like the previous, prior to like the last 2 or 3 weeks before that, right? Their offensive line seemed to have figured some things out at one point. It seemed like all that went out the window, though. The biggest thing to me is if they don't cause turnovers, that's the Achilles heel of this Steelers team. The games where they cause turnovers, I'm talking about the Patriots, I'm talking about the Colts. Those are 2 very good teams that they beat. Yet a lot of it just comes down to the fact that the Patriots, they caused like 5 turnovers, and against the Colts, it was the same thing. It was like 5 turnovers against the Colts too. Like, any team should be able to win that sort of game. If you cause, and I'm not saying that they were lucky, the defense played well enough to cause those, but that's sort of their recipe for success. That's not very repeatable. Joe Flacco does make mistakes. He is someone that isn't shy from just chucking the ball down the field. But at the same time, he has a really good connection right now with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think he has a really good feel for this offense. I think this is going to be another game where we see Chase and Higgins have huge games. They were essentially their run game along with Chase Brown against the Steelers last time when they beat the Steelers, and that they actually started the kind of spiraling of this Steelers team. So to me, I actually think that the Steelers will win this game at home. I think they're going to be desperate. I see the Steelers winning this game 24-20. So I think it'll be a close game, but I do think the Steelers pull this one out just purely because I think the Bengals defense is just that bad. And I know you guys are kind of wondering, like, why is it going to be such a low-scoring game? I do think that Tomlin is going to have a really good game plan to slow down the touchdowns at least. I think he's going to take away the big plays. He's going to keep this offense in front of him, and he's going to try to force them to kick a lot of field goals. So that's why I think it's going to be 24-20. Still got a couple games left to talk about. Again, make sure you're talking in chat. It's always really fun to go back and forth. So feel free to give me any take you want me to review. Tell me any of my takes you're not liking. Again, I also prompted with the question, who's the MVP of the league at this point in time? Let me know who you think. At this point, I think it's Jonathan Taylor. I don't even think it's anywhere particular close either. So that's who I would put up there. But tell me who you would have. First off, let's talk about this Chargers versus Jags game. First off, I still haven't heard whether or not, and I keep looking, and I'll see it again. Let's see if there's any news on Omarion Hampton. I'm not sure if he is playing yet, or if he will play. He's been out for 5 straight weeks, and at this point, he could return, but they're not 100% sure, and I think that's going to be a huge factor. But this Jags team, I will say this: I don't think they're as good as their record says. A huge reason for that is Trevor Lawrence. Like, Trevor Lawrence, I'm not sure what happened the last couple years, and he's had some decent games, but he's kind of like Penix a little bit in the sense he's just inconsistent, and he shouldn't be, especially at the age that he's at and how much experience he's had. I know he's dealt with a lot of head coaches, and that's not easy. He dealt with a fair amount of systems, that's not easy. But at the same time, I haven't really seen him improve in the NFL. That's the scary part, is that from like a skills perspective, like everything in every factor of being a quarterback, I have yet to see Trevor Lawrence improve in any of those aspects. To me, it's this game is going to come down to whether or not whether or not Travis Etienne has a big game. Like that's going to be the biggest tell of this situation, is whether or not Travis Etienne has a big game. And again, I don't trust Lawrence. I think the Chargers win this game. I think they win this game 27-16. They're just on a roll right now. The way they played against the Steelers, super impressive. Loving what Vidal is doing as a running back, a backup running back for them. He's done a great job of taking on that load without having Omarion Hampton and obviously Najee Harris. And I think their pass attack is just way too good for this Jags team, especially without Travis Hunter for the rest of the year. I just think that the Colts will win again, 27-16. Now, this next upcoming game, I do think will actually be the game of the week. Could actually end up becoming the game of the year. I think it has that sort of that pedigree and that sort of hype around it, just because I'm talking about the Seahawks versus the Rams. The Seahawks and the Rams, they're both tied for first place in the NFC West. I'll pull this up real fast. They both are, I believe, 8-2. Yes, they're 7-2. They both are 7-2, and this game is in Los Angeles, which I think does really help out this Rams team. They don't have a huge home field advantage situation in LA, but it's also the fact that it's not being played in Seattle again in front of the 12th man, right? They're known for being a loud stadium. I think that's going to play a huge factor in this. Now, when I look at this game, it's interesting because Stafford is 4th in the league in passing. Darnold is not far behind him. He is 7th in the league. To me, it just comes down to like, who do I actually think has the edge in this situation? I think both of them, like they both have very young, exciting run to the ball style sort of defenses. I think both of them have great coaching, and their quarterback play is obviously at a high level. To me, I just have to give the edge to Matt Stafford, and the biggest reason I have to give the edge to Matt Stafford is the fact that he's been in this situation before. He's played in much bigger games. He's had a lot more pressure on him, and just the overall experience. Like Sam Darnold, how he looked in that playoff game against the for the Vikings, he was just way off. And I'm not saying this is a playoff game, but in a sense, I think this is going to have a playoff atmosphere. I think this is going to be one of the first games of the year where you truly see a playoff atmosphere. And I think this is going to be a game, again, that's going to come down to the end. I think that the Rams will win this battle just purely because it's at home. I think the Rams win this game 24-20. And I think a lot of it, again, has to do with the fact that I think Darnold will have a couple mistakes. I don't know if it'll be a turnover or what, but I think there will be a situation where Stafford has to rise to the occasion, and so does Darnold. And I think Stafford doesn't. I think Darnold doesn't, if I'm being completely honest. All right, let's talk a little bit about 49ers versus the Cardinals. First off, here I am actually doubting the 49ers again. I know they played against the Rams, so that's a tough example to use. But their defense just didn't have enough. And oddly enough, Jacoby Brissett and this Cardinals teams, like they actually look solid on offense. Like Jacoby Brissett is putting up insane numbers as a quarterback. And this is with a struggling run game. Like that's the crazy part. Like Jacoby Brissett, like essentially a career backup. He's had a couple starting, opportunities. He's really slinging the ball down the field on a regular basis. Like the way he's been playing the last 3-4 weeks is actually fun to watch. Now, I think that the 49ers, I think they have a good enough defense to probably keep up with them. And to me, I need to see CMC get back into it. I think CMC is going to have to put his team on his back. And For some reason, I think this will be a close game. Even though this is in Arizona, I just like the 49ers as a culture, as a team overall. Every time I doubt them is when they win. And right now in my head, I'm doubting them. And that is the exact reason why I have to trust my gut, not my head. And I'm going to go with CMC carries this team on his back, and they win 23-20. We got three more games to talk about. Let's dive in a little bit about the Ravens versus the Browns. So first things first, the Browns second best defense in the league. Myles Garrett, he is obviously the linchpin of this defense. He is what makes this engine go. He does a good job against the Ravens on a pretty regular basis. He also hates playing against Lamar Jackson. He doesn't necessarily hasn't gone out and said it, but I've seen occasion after occasion where he thinks he has Lamar Jackson in his grasp and he's able to scramble away and make a huge play. And Myles Garrett just looks in amazement and also just being pissed off. Now, the fact that the Browns just continuously lose, this game is in Cleveland. I don't think that they have much to fight for right now. At this point, what this Browns team is doing is trying to figure out if Dylan Gabriel is the guy or potentially Shedeur Sanders. I actually was wondering if they were going to potentially try Shedeur Sanders in a game soon. It's not like Dylan Gabriel is playing poorly, but at the same time, he's not winning games right now, right? And so because of that, for me, I had to wonder, like, why not give him a shot? Like this Browns team, like they lost to I'm pretty sure, call me crazy, I'm pretty sure they lost to the Jets recently. Yeah, they lost to the Jets, they lost to the Patriots, they beat the Dolphins. But then Steelers, Vikings, Lions beat the Packers crazy, lost to the Ravens, lost to the Bengals, right? And so to me, they don't have much that they're actually fighting for. I just don't know if I see the Browns getting up enough for this game. I'm curious to see how Quinshon Judkins does. He actually played pretty well against them in the first matchup. The Ravens just have so much they're fighting for right now. They're still, in pretty much the rest of the season, unless both the Bengals and the Steelers continue to lose games regularly, they're in a must-win situation every single game. Like they still have a losing record. They're 4-5. And so they still have to find ways to win these games. And I think they just have so much more to fight for. And that's the biggest reason why I had to have the Steelers in this game. Or the Ravens in this game. I think the Ravens win this game 24-17. I think Kyle Hamilton is going to be a nightmare for Dylan Gabriel. I love how they're playing Kyle Hamilton out there. He essentially just fills in every hole that this Ravens defense has. Like if there's a weakness that Zach Orr sees, he's like, hey, you're playing slot corner. Hey, you're playing safety. Hey, you're playing outside defense. Like you're playing edge rusher. You're playing outside linebacker. He's been everywhere, and it's really fun to watch. I think he's going to cause nightmares for Dylan Gabriel. And again, I see the Ravens winning this game 24-17. Next game we're going to talk about, Chiefs versus Broncos, and this is a game. I think a couple weeks ago I would have told you the Broncos will win this game. But recently, they just keep squeaking out these wins, and the biggest reason they're winning these games is their defense, right? That's a very obvious, because I just don't like what I've seen out of Bo Nix. Like Bo Nix, he's probably looked the most inconsistent he's been like his entire career. Maybe the beginning of his career as a rookie, but this year especially, the last 3 games, they've really just squeaked out wins, and a lot of it doesn't have to do with him. It has to do with their defense kind of keeping them in good enough position to get a couple yards down the field in order to kick a field goal to win the game at the end of the game, right? Like that's kind of what it looks like. I also don't like the fact that I don't think they're going to be I don't think they're going to have Patrick Surtain back. I think the Chiefs are hungry. They know how to win games in situations like this, and at this point they have to win these games because the Chiefs they're far enough behind from a playoff picture perspective that they need to figure this out. They're 5-4 and they're still behind teams like the Bills, like the Chargers, like the Broncos, right? So I actually think the Chargers win this game. I think they win this game just purely because the the Broncos offense just hasn't been able to figure things out. I think they win this game 21-13. Last game I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Sunday night football game. This is going to be another great matchup. I know I might reconsider what I said earlier. First off, I talked about the Seahawks and the Rams might be being the game of the week. Lions versus Eagles has a really good shot at this as well. Like, I think this is going to be an electric game. I really do. I think this is going to be a game where it's going to be back and forth. I think you're going to see offensive struggles. I think you're going to see defensive struggles on both sides because both these teams are just so good. The Lions offense, their run game, going up against that Eagles defense, that's not an easy defense to go up against. I'll pull this up really fast from a team perspective. The Eagles, from a rushing perspective, give up 118 yards a game, and they're giving up 209 passing yards. Maybe they looked a lot better because they're going up against the Packers last week, but I do think the Lions will be able to run on this defense. I'm curious to see how Lane Johnson is doing because Aiden Hutchinson might be able to take advantage of the fact that Lane Johnson has like a bummed leg, although that guy was like injured all of last year and he continued to play and led them. I wouldn't say he led them, but he helped them in a huge way win that Super Bowl. And so, to me, I don't like how Barkley has looked the last few games. Like this past game. Let's just look this up real fast because I don't remember, but I know he did not perform at a high level. Let's go back here. Week 10. Let's look at what Saquon Barkley's stats were. Because, again, I know I wasn't impressed. 22 carries for 60 yards is what Saquon Barkley did last week against the Packers. I know the Packers have a good defense, right, in fairness to him. But at the same time, Saquon Barkley, who got a huge contract, he's 15th in the league right now in rushing. He has 579 total yards rushing. To give you an example of like where that actually ranks, like I know 15th doesn't sound terrible. It's middle of the pack by team. Jonathan Taylor, 1,139 yards. Just to give you a frame of reference, Jonathan Taylor has almost run for over 600 yards more than him. Right? That's double. That's double what Saquon Barkley has done this year, is what Jonathan Taylor has done. And I think we all know how the receiving is looking, i.e., I'm talking about not Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is 12th in the league right now in receiving, but if you want to find A.J. Brown, he's 50th. Right? He has 408 yards receiving so far this year. I just don't know if the Eagles offense can keep up with the Lions offense. I think that's the biggest factor when it comes to determining like how I see this game going. I love this matchup. Again, I think it's going to be back and forth, but I just see the Eagles going for field goals more than touchdowns in this game. I think the Lions win this game. I think they win it 27-24. I really do. But that really covers the Thursday night game. That covers the Sunday slate. Really do appreciate everyone joining in today. Had a lot of fun with you. Make sure, again, you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure you like and comment on this video. It helps a lot of people find me so that more people can join in on these live streams. We could have a good time. But that's it for me today. Thank you again for watching. This is your host, Bad Takes.